You are now tuned into the truth frequency.
We are TFR. TFR.
Truth Frequency Radio.
I've been a participant in some of the most insidious lies and witnessed to deeds that no crazed man could imagine. I spent years watching you from my lofty position to know that you were the one I could trust.
And why did you lie to me?
There still exist some secrets which should remain secret. Truths that people are just not ready to know.
Who are you to decide that?
The world's reaction to such knowledge would be far too dangerous.
Dangerous? You mean in the sense of outrage? Like the reaction to the Kennedy assassination, or MIAs, or radiation experiments on terminal patients, Watergate, Iran-Contra, Roswell, the Tuskegee experiments. Where will it end?
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth!
Get out!
Or what? You'll kill me?
Always remember, dissension's the greatest form of patriotism.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies.
We have before us the opportunity to forge a new world order.
Yes, we can. And you say.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories.
A lie is most convincingly hidden between two truths.
Well, I guess it won't end.
No! I don't have time for this. This is about saving the future of humanity.
We know things are bad, worse than bad. We know the air is unfit to breathe and our food is unfit to eat. I don't want you to protest. I don't want you to write to your congressman because I wouldn't know what to tell you to write. I don't know what to do about the depression and the inflation and the crime in the street. All I know is that first, you've got to get mad.
The line must be drawn here. This far, no farther.
I want you to get up right now. Go to your windows, open them, and stick your head out and yell, I'm a human being. My life has value, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
You shall not pass!
You're listening to the Revolutionary Radio Project with your host, Rob Skiba.
Hello and welcome to the Revolutionary Radio Project. I am your host, Rob Skiba. And that's right, I played the conspiracy intro, and you know what that means. Whenever I play that intro, it means we're going to talk about something that could be, possibly, maybe, a conspiracy. Although usually when I talk about conspiracies on this program, I'm talking about government type of conspiracies, things related to the government or NASA and that sort of thing. This may be a different type of conspiracy. I'll let you guys decide after we're done with this broadcast. Could it be simply something that got lost in translation, or could it be something perhaps deeper and darker where the enemy of all of mankind, i.e. Satan, Lucifer, the devil, may have had plans to try to get us off track? I don't know. I guess we'll find out. My guest tonight is an individual named Andrew Hoy, and I met Andrew as a result of some of the things that I've been covering on my YouTube channel and on Facebook and things like that. And actually a mutual friend contacted me and said, hey, this guy Andrew's been trying to get a hold of you. He sent you a package in the mail. And, you know, to be fair, to be honest with you, I get a lot of mail. And if it's much more than a page long, it goes into the I'll get to it later pile, which I almost never have time to get to. So he had sent me a rather thick packet, and didn't have time to look at it. I saw there was a thick packet, put it in that pile, but then this individual happened to catch me one day on the phone had a good conversation with this person and said, you really need to look for that mail, see if you got it. It would be worth your time. And I did. I found the package, opened it up, looked through it, and frankly was blown away. I was impressed, but had a lot of questions, and we'll perhaps get to some of those questions this evening. Andrew Hoy worked as a professional engineer for over 15 years, searching for greater meaning. He embarked on an African missionary work where he began questioning traditional church doctrines. I know what that's like. After every single mission trip I went on, came back a little bit more jaded when I came back to the Western church and began to question a lot of things when I got back here, so I can certainly relate to that. He says only after he moved to Israel to study the Scriptures did he find the answers. Well, go figure, right? The answers are in the Bible, along with a passion for discipleship and an authentic understanding of the Great Commission. Well, amen to that. I'm going to go ahead and bring my guest on now. Andrew, are you there, sir?
I'm here, Rob.
Hey, man, thanks for coming on tonight. Really appreciate you coming on my radio show.
Sure thing. Hope to enjoy it. I think I'll enjoy it.
Yeah, well... that's a very brief introduction, so just for the sake of my listeners and for me as well, why don't you tell us all a little bit more about yourself? How did you come to know the Lord, and tell us a little bit about your professional background.
Okay. Well, I'm a Milwaukee native, but I grew up in the burbs, and I was born into the Lutheran world, and I guess... It wasn't until school. I went to a Milwaukee School of Engineering. Dad was a professor, so it was a pretty logical choice where to go to school after I finished high school. And basically, in thermodynamics class, I came to realize that there are no free lunches. There's the first and second law of thermodynamics, which we're talking about entropy and or the degradation of energy and whatnot, and the conservation of matter. And I started thinking, how does this whole, the Big Bang mechanics work, and concluded that one of these two scientific laws need to be, in a sense, violated. So there's something, greater beyond that. So that was really my true point of conviction. After that, I went to work for the power and utilities a little bit. I got certified as a professional engineer. I hit around 30, and I started doing a lot more soul searching. Grandmother died, and starting to ponder the meaning of life a little bit more. Got a little bit more into the church setting, and basically started auditing a Old Testament graduate class. Not long thereafter, I ended up losing my job. That was kind of around the time that Enron threw a monkey wrench in the whole energy economy. With the job loss, I wanted to do something different. That's why I did the African, is kind of a hybrid religious humanitarian thing. Well, that gave me a lot of time to read, and also, like you mentioned before, a lot of time to question, as I saw things that were going on that just didn't make any practical sense, and I was wondering how it tied into the Bible. So started studying the Old Testament, the ministry, priesthood, Levitical system. What does it all mean? Where did it all come from? How is it now? Why is it now? And after that, eventually got a job in engineering again. 2005, I made my first trip to Israel. I ended up reading Jordan Rubin, The Maker's Diet, which is a kind of interesting testimony. He came down with Crohn's disease and ended up really sick, and more or less got healed through kosher and organic eating. And he said it was a fascinating testimony, but he left out a lot of exegesis. And 2007, I was driving to Minnesota, and I said, "Well, I'm going to write a book about that," because it was one of those things that was picking at me and haunting me. And so that was the beginning of my book writing efforts, I guess. So I wanted to do a kind of a kosher exegesis of New Testament texts. Well, that didn't finish up right there, because I kept learning I was wrong about a lot of things. So I got involved with the home fellowship and started getting turned on to more Hebrew. And my friend Aaron, he said, yeah, we should learn Hebrew. And I said, yeah, well, why not? Let's do that. Well, after 2 weeks of saying that, he moved away, and I said, well, I said I would do it, so I'm going to keep at it. And as time progressed, again, I just realized how many things I didn't know and had to unlearn, relearn, and eventually I ended up losing my job once again. And this time I'm like, well, what do I do? And I had this Hebrew Ritzim session, so I said, well, I think I'll learn some more Hebrew. And I was wondering, how do I learn Hebrew good and quick? And I said, well, did a little research and found the only thing that was going to satisfy my appetite was moving to Israel and going to Ulpan there. So I continued working on my book, and I finished it. It was a pain, and after that I said, no more book writing. Then I ended up 2013 Electric Universe Conference in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And again, riding the plane home, I got inspired to write again, even after I said no more. And I really suppressed that for a while. But then I started writing anyway again, and I mean it's almost like taking sour milk out of the refrigerator and putting it back in and coming back to it and say, well, maybe it'll be better this time, you know. So this is when I kind of started studying a few Hebrew words in particular, and was on the word cherubim, wondering how that tied into things electrical in the Bible, and one of the occurrences was Exodus, which led me to the Tabernacle study. So I had no desire to start studying the Tabernacle, but that's where this thing led me. So that's how I started doing what I'm doing now.
For the sake of our audience that may not be familiar with the Tabernacle, why don't you kind of, what is the Tabernacle, where do we find it in the Bible, and just kind of give us a sort of a background history of what the Tabernacle is.
Again, I was only studying something else, and that something else was a cherub, and it was the word cherub was tied into the mention of the Exodus, the curtains. Okay, so I started looking at the curtains because they contained a Hebrew word for cherub, and I was wondering what the physical construction layout of these words, because it's Exodus 26 1 through well, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself as far as what the tabernacle was all about. So after the Egyptian exodus, let my people go, you got Israel, the whole horde of Israel comes out of Egypt, parked at Mount Sinai, and they're basically told, okay, now that you're out, make a tabernacle for me here. And this is why they were told to get out of Egypt, or as far as what Pharaoh was told. He said, let my people go so that they may hold a festival to me in the wilderness. So this is the part of the core purpose that was explained to Pharaoh of why these people were supposed to come out. And so, okay, come out, make me a tabernacle. So the tabernacle, starting with Exodus 25, talking about the materials they started staging and everything, collecting raw materials. And then they also left, of course, with the spoils of Egypt, a lot of gold and fabrics and, nice things, basically. Exodus 26 then starts getting into the actual mechanics on how the tabernacle was to be built. And again, I never really cared about it. Even being an engineer, I'm going, oh well, yeah, it's a building, whatever. I mean, I'm a mechanical engineer, not an architectural or structural engineer. So it's like, okay, well, building's a building. It just sits there. Engineering joke is like this, that mechanical engineers build bombs and civil engineers build targets. So that's always the trump in college anyway. So with this being just a stationary thing, it's like, well, a mechanical guy, like some movement in my stuff or what have you. So I start reading this, and I guess it's the technical, getting into the Hebrew things, because I know from, I've been duped so many times in bad translations in reading it and coming up with what I think is a viable doctrine, based on the translations. And that this is what caused me to have to rewrite my book so many times, is because it's like, okay, well, I was using English. I have to not use English and get back to the original languages. So Exodus 26 starts with these curtains. It talks about two sets of curtains they're making for the tabernacle, and nobody really cares about curtains. Why would anyone care about curtains? That's more boring than a building, right? And I start looking at the dimensions, and one of the curtain sets they're making 11 curtains. I should look at the first one first. They're making 10 curtains, 28 by 4. That's in, I want to say, Exodus 1 through 6, and then Exodus 7 through 12 or 13. It's then talking about the wool ones, which are 4 by 30, and there's 11 of those being made. And so the text is talking about how the one set is and how the other set is, and it seems to have a description of how one is kind of relative to another, and that's kind of where I started on this discovery here. So there's the question of how do these things lay out, and conventional wisdom says this whole tabernacle is a rectangular thing. You've seen all the pictures. They've got actual live practice models here in the U.S., out of California, out of Oklahoma, I would say Arkansas, and Israel. They've had one near Jericho. They got one Timnah near Eilat, which is down by the Red Sea. So there's a number of these things that have been physically, constructed and modeled, and basically everyone makes them rectangular. I personally think it's laid out rectangular because they didn't follow the instructions to the letter, and I think this is where everything has been lost in translation.
Well, okay, so this is really interesting. So it's funny how God will send people on a path that can radically change their life in many cases. So you're intrigued by the cherubim. The cherubim show up on the curtains. You're looking at the curtains, and all of a sudden you're impressed to try to start laying this stuff out. Probably as the engineer in you, I guess, is looking at. I shop at IKEA, and if anybody's ever shopped at IKEA, you get the furniture and you open the box up, and it's all these boards and little inserts you put in the boards, and these little pegs. Some are wooden, some are metal that twist and go into the inserts, and if you don't do it exactly right, it's a nightmare. So I can kind of just see you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but did you start looking at Exodus 23 or 26, excuse me, and just see like a parts list and say, okay, how does this go together?
Well, I really started with just these curtains, and it was, I guess, observation on the curtains. It was how they go together. I actually started looking at the web, seeing how these two curtain sets were, and kind of the cherubim and the significance of the cherubim. And I look at all these different images, and everyone's got a different story, a different take on it, and basically, they make one sheet that's, I want to say, 42 by 30, and then the other one is, 28 by 40. And it talks about folding one in half and overlapping, or moving it by about a cubit. And so I'm looking at all these descriptions and looking at they're all different. And then I start looking at more of these layouts, and they're all different. And I just, again, intuitively know I can't look at the English because I can't trust it. And I wasted a lot of time in writing the kosher book because I thought there was a distinction between clean and ceremonially clean and unclean and ceremonially unclean. You see, this is another add-in by translators, for their own doctrinal ambitions and whatnot. So I thought there was an actual distinction in some of that, and you start researching it in original languages, and nope. And it's a similar thing. So there's just a whole bunch of things in the description, in the frame, and everything like that, where they're describing particular shapes in English, and the text doesn't speak to these shapes, and getting into the dimensions. Well, there's a lot of unspecified dimensions. That you've got to fill in the gaps, because otherwise it's sometimes the lengths are not given. Sometimes you're only given a weight of material, total amount of unit weight to work with, but the items are all there. So it's almost like taking a Lego set and dumping it out on the or the IKEA and dumping it out of the original package, only to find more boxes, more containers where you don't know what's inside them. You might know what some of them weigh, but you don't know how any of them are shaped. So you can shake the box around all you want, but until you bust it open, you really can't get there. In this case, you can't really bust them open by descriptions. Like, for example, the roof. There's no dimensions given to the roof. The roof is made of leather, which stands to reason because, hey, it's a tent. That's what you use, a canvas type tent. Leather stops the rain from falling through, and that's why you don't use the linen or the wool. For the roof is you use leather, and for the leather top, there's zero dimensional specifications. It says the description is it's got to cover the whole tent. So, when you look at that, that's this is where they start filling in the gaps with what they do. And they've got they start with the wrong orientation on a lot of their hardware, and that's why, in my opinion, they come up with the wrong overall description.
So, I've always seen the rectangular depiction of the tabernacle. There's always some artist's representation of it that we see over and over and over again. So. But there seems to be variants of it. Can you describe some of the variants that have been out there on the rectangular shape? They're not always depicted the same way.
Yeah, some of them are shown kind of like A-frame. I want to say the Holman Bible, the Jewish Encyclopedia. They show kind of like what's very similar to an A-frame roof. And part of it, you can understand why they would go there because. Most people have figured out by now a flat roof tent doesn't work so well. You end up having a big, rain collection tarp in the end. But and as far as the corners, they don't know what to do with some of the corners. You start looking at the fence posts and how high they are, and as far as what they're made of, they're basically not. They're not paying close attention to what the text gives you to work with. So the text is kind of giving you a material list, and but it's again expressed in a fill in the gaps type thing. And it's really, after I found out that what I think the real design is, it's really a matter of economy of language. It's saying so much all at once, and it's having you put in the details, and this is why the curtain dimensions are so important, is because it starts dictating the remainder of the hardware geometry, or I shouldn't say the remainder, much of either the hardware geometry itself or the layout of that geometry.
So, for you, that's like everything really depends on how you orient the curtains. Is there more than one way, or like?
Sure. Well, it says to connect them all edge to edge. And when I say edge to edge, and they're all fitted with loops. Okay, so when you have a sheet that measures 4 cubits by 30 cubits, and a cubit depends upon which standard you want to use. I mean, it's a material to what I've come for conclusions on my design. Anywhere between 15, 18, 21, 25 inches for a cubit. So if you're using, let's say, a 25-inch cubit, a sheet or a curtain that they're making is 30 cubits long. So that's, say, 60 feet. So 8 feet tall by 60 feet long or wide. I mean, this is a big piece of fabric. I mean, if you can imagine the loom that they're gonna to make this thing on. I mean, this is. I say that this is a highly engineered component because there's more detail given regarding these tabernacle curtains than there is the entire the entire Ark of the Covenant. And so you have to ask the question: why are these strange details so important? Make it with 50 loops and all that kind of stuff. And in conventional models, they basically treat them like drapes. They toss them over, and then they start connecting them to things contrary to what the Torah says.
Yeah. So in the conventional model, it's an afterthought. Okay, once you build this thing, throw these over the top of it. But you're saying, no, this is mentioned the way it's mentioned because it determines the actual overall shape and function of it, right?
Absolutely. So,
but they're made of different types of skins, and there's one that's always kind of perplexed me, and that's Exodus 26:14, where King James says covering of badger skins. But I mean, if you just do a parallel Bible on, this is one of those reasons why I value the parallel Bible model, where you compare translations, because you're looking at, the NIV just says durable leather. Okay, that's cool. The New Living says ram skins and goat skins. English Standard says goat skins. The New American Standard says porpoise. Then you get manatee in the Holman Christian Standard. You get dolphin in the International Standard. I mean, there's a big difference between a porpoise and badgers. I mean, what's going on here?
Well, between Flipper and Moby Dick, right?
Or sealskin in the JPS Tanakh 1917.
Yeah. So I don't think they killed Flipper or Moby Dick when they were
in the desert. How are you going to get porpoise skin in the middle of the desert?
So, if you look at you start into Exodus 25, which is where this materialists start. It's described the offerings that they're bringing is teruma. Well, the Hebrew ram, basically, this is where we get I think the name of the ram animal, the ram truck. Something on high. Look at a ram stands up on its hind legs. A ram, walks around on a mountaintop and everything like that. So you have the etymology, I think, is of the English ram. I mean, it won't tell you that when you look at these etymology searches. All the Hebrew roots of so many English words. But getting into this principle of clean and unclean, well, guess what? They're not told they can eat fish with fins and scales. They can't eat flipper. Flipper's not allowed. Same thing with manatees and badgers and all that. These are unclean animals. Don't cut them open on purpose. Because they have biological things that you do not want to expose yourself to. And that's part of what's going on. So from the Hebrew, from what I can tell, we're talking either ram and or deer skins, and I think they were using the two because of the different properties of these different animals.
Okay, so the question would be then is, are they using clean or unclean skins on the most holy thing? That's going to contain the presence of God.
Yeah, I mean, tanning is not a pretty business, but the same as like Ezekiel was allowed to cook his food over cow dung, and guess what? Cow dung is it's regarded as clean according to the Bible. Why? Because cows are herbivores; they eat only grass, and they leave the patty behind, like in kind. And they have the stomachs, chewing the cud, et cetera, et cetera. So this is another criteria for the clean animal. Well, the end product, so the hockey pucks on the ground left behind, we're talking you can use that as fuel. And if you actually look at the heat content, it's better than a lot of woods, and it's somewhere pound for pound it rates up there with coal, like a mid-grade coal, as far as BTU content. So it's a handy fuel. I mean, if you got grazing animals, if you can imagine 2 million Israelites cruising out of Egypt and walking around with cows and they had flocks and herds, and so if these flocks and herds, they got to eat something. They got to eat grass, and so I don't think they're in the forest. They're on the plains somewhere, and if they're whatever grazing they're doing. So if you can imagine how much wood for cooking a group of 2 million people, how much fuel they're going to need. Well, you got a really nice grass converter where it's essentially converted grass to firewood. You're not looking at lots of sticks after your first few days in town. If you're grabbing all the wood, some of the wood for utility, and then the rest of it, you're going to be burning it up pretty quick.
So it's your contention then that whatever that other skin was, it's not going to be an unclean animal, but it's going to be a clean animal.
Yeah, I mean they would have had to have between flocks and herds, they would have had plenty leather by themselves, try to get leather off of what a dolphin or a manatee or whatever, compared to say a bull or a ram or what have you. I mean, what's naturally occurring in the area, and what do you domesticate? What can you corral? All that kind of stuff. It's the translators are they openly admit. I'm going to say the NIV says flora and fauna. The animals and the plant types are saying, well, we don't really know entirely what it is, and I wouldn't fight on a hill, but I personally think between rams and deer or gazelle, something like that. This is the animal types we're talking. Between in that region, that's available. That's you got so many people there, and with the flocks and herds, that's not that much leather to procure, I guess. So why would you do something that ridiculous? So.
Well, yeah, and when you're out in the desert of Arabia, Mount Sinai, I can't imagine you're going to find too many dolphins or seals or anything like that. So, but in the traditional model that most of us have seen, either the kind of the A-frame, or more commonly I've seen more of just a rectangular box with when you look at how much fabric is told to them to create, it seems like they just say, well, they must be stacked on top of each other. So you got linen with goat hair on top of the linen, and red dyed ram skin on top of the goat hair, and then badger, porpoise or whatever on top of that. I mean, is that why they decide it must be 4 on top of each other, because they just have so much of it?
If you look at the chronology, Exodus 26:1-6, it's talking about the linen. Then it talks about to cover the tent is next up is the wool. Then it makes mention in 26:13, I think 14 or 13. I think it's 14 of the basically the reddened leather, which seems to be the third layer. Then the fourth, which is the one on top, which isn't described as reddened. And I would contend that they weren't trying to make it a particular color. We're talking about tanning. I mean, red is basically the word that is used is derived from like Adam and Adom, Adamah, earth. It's red, and this is what the tanning process. To me, it seems to be describing the tanning process. I mean, when you use tannin from trees, you're getting stuff from tree bark, chemicals from tree bark. You're getting that. It's in astringent and it's antibacterial, etc. So it's toughening up the leather, and it's curing it in some way. So to me, this is what they think is the third layer is. Now, why, if you're going to have the upper layer on top, why would you have that one untreated, and then the other one? I don't care if you think it's colored or if it's treated like tanning. Why would you put that underneath the outer layer? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, the other thing that doesn't make sense is it looks like you got this blending thing where we're not supposed to blend wool and linen, and yet you've got those two laying right on top of each other in this model here. And actually, we don't have time to go into that right now. We're about ready to go to break, but when we come back from break, I would like you to address that, if you would.
Okay.
All right, and we'll be back shortly.
Truth Frequency Radio.
The wicked ones obviously under heavy Masonic influence.
and welcome back to the Revolutionary Radio Project. I'm your host, Rob Skiba. For the second hour of the broadcast, I'm talking with my guest, Andrew Hoy, and we were discussing some of the potential problems with the traditional design and layout of the tabernacle that the Israelites had in the wilderness after the time of the Exodus there from Egypt. And right before the break, we were talking about specifically the issue of wool and linen. And, we've got a command right here in Leviticus 19:19. You shall keep my statutes. Thou shalt not let thy cattle gender with a diverse kind. Thou shalt not sow thy field with mingled seed. Neither shall a garment be mingled of linen and wool come upon thee. And yet, here we have linen and wool stacked right on top of each other on the most holy place, at the time anyway, in existence. What's your take on that?
Yeah, like you said, it's you have to question it. Some people would say, well, that's not mixing if you're putting one layer over the other. But I don't know, anyone who's thrown different materials in a dryer and has watched the amount of static. I mean, this is we're talking grade school science experiments. Get the glass rod and the rubber rod, the metal rod, and you rub this one on wool and this one on cotton and this one. So it's obvious you're doing something. In the electrostatic world. I guess the other realms I would tend to wonder about is electrochemical. You got sweat, the pH of sweat. What's going on in the body chemistry. I mean, the body is a biochemical engine to some degree, right? And we have to wonder what's behind it. I've seen a lot of people offer different views. I mean, Deuteronomy 21:21. I'm looking at. Do not wear clothes of wool and linen woven together. Some people, aren't that. How would I say? They have differing opinions on the fabrics. Whether or not you can wear synthetic blends and all that. But I see this whole thing as like, if God knows more than we do, let's err on the side of caution and not be mixing these fabrics. I mean, the mixing the seeds, mixing all these things. I look at these things under a microscope. Not me myself, but I'm talking Google image or something. And one thing that really fascinated me when I was studying out the fabrics possibly used in these things is the fabric structures of some of the plants. Tend to resemble Birkeland currents, which is just basically twisted pairs of electricity, plasma flow. And so, my question I would ask is, is this a an electrical? We don't typically think of plant life conducting electricity, but obviously it's shaped and it takes on the same shapes as some of this. If you look at the tree and you look at the root pattern above and below, and you compare that to lightning clusters and everything, it's striking how similar these things are. So it seems to be the path of electricity flow. When I look at it, that's what I see. So
yeah, there's a website people can check out if they're interested in this whole issue. It's called lifegivinglinen.com. I'm just going to read the first paragraph on the page. It says linen-study.html. In 2003, a study was done by a Jewish doctor, Heidi Yellen, on the frequencies of fabric. According to this study, the human body has a signature frequency of 100, and organic cotton is the same, 100. The study showed that if the number is lower than 100, it puts a strain on the body. A diseased, nearly dead person has a frequency of about 15, and that is where polyester, rayon, and silk register. Non-organic cotton registers a signature frequency of about 70. However, if the fabric has a higher frequency, it gives energy to the body. This is where linen comes in as a super fabric. Its frequency is 5,000. Wool is also 5,000, but when mixed together with linen, the frequencies cancel each other out and fall to 0. Even wearing a wool sweater on top of a linen outfit in a study collapsed the electrical field. The reason for this could be that the energy field of wool flows from left to right, while that of linen flows in the opposite direction from right to left. So, when we consider the tabernacle and specifically the Ark of the Covenant that's inside of the tabernacle, which, I think we could make a really good argument for saying it has electrical properties to it. I mean, this whole thing appears to have electrical properties to it. So why would you put something that has counterproductive frequencies right on top of each other?
Yeah, I don't know. You're talking about the the frequencies of 5,000 and 100. For the other things that I tend to. I'm a guy who likes to cancel my units. So if I don't see an engineering unit there, I kind of freak out. And I haven't studied this in the hugest amount of detail, but some of this it gets to a matter of just conviction and belief. And I've heard people do studies like that. I err on the side of believing them because it gets into the whole X-ray thing. When I say X-ray thing, before they discovered X-rays, as far as we knew, there weren't such a thing. Do we have a ghostometer? Can we measure, when I say ghosts, in that things outside of our normal realm of perception, our vision is such and such. Well, birds see better. Our hearing is such and such. Well, dogs hear better. So if something is oscillating at 30,000, 40,000 hertz, it's outside of the threshold of human hearing, but that doesn't mean it doesn't make a sound. So if the tree falls in the forest and it lands at 40,000 hertz, do we hear it? And the answer is no, but it doesn't make a sound, and the answer is yes. So I take this frequency study in a similar thing. I think there's things in the electromagnetic spectrum that we just haven't had the insight and the wherewithal or the metrology, the gizmos to read the parameters, the levels, the power levels, and the intensities, frequencies, the phases, things of whatever someone might call other dimensional. So I just our known science doesn't know everything. It's naturalistic. Most scientists are kind of like naturalistic physicists, or into naturalistic or materialistic physics, saying it's a religious worldview they have. They start with the idea that we're just a bunch of protons, neutrons, and electrons, and we're just chemical machines, and only that, and there's no ghost in the machine. And therefore, in a sense, we say, we don't have free will anymore because I'm just a product of my upbringing and my chemical reactions, however that all works out. I mean, that's the implications of that. It's a ridiculous worldview. I mean, to say that there's nothing acting on our minds that's outside our body, I think it's kind of childish.
Well, again, it goes to God created all this stuff. So he knew what he was doing, and he knew what, just like the food issue. He knew how he created certain animals. He knew how he created the human body. He knew what would interact well with our body and give us energy and be good for us, and what would be a negative influence on our body if we ate it. And so, it's the same thing. It's like, is God against your favorite polyester outfit? Well, I mean, if he put inherent frequencies in organic stuff and inorganic stuff and whatnot, and our bodies are electrical, then it makes sense that he would give us guidelines on what to wear and what not to wear and what to blend and what not to blend, in terms of what we use on our body to keep the frequencies in the positive realm, as opposed to canceling it out or sucking it down or giving you a low frequency. I don't understand all that stuff either. I look at the stuff, I read it, and go, okay, well, that's interesting. But what intrigues me about what we're going to be getting into as we move forward in this broadcast is, a different idea concerning the construction of the tabernacle may, in fact, affect the way, if God says, make this out of this, make this out of that, make it so high, make it so wide, he's got a reason for it. And if we look at the traditional rectangle model, you've pointed out a number of structural problems with it, from an engineering perspective. I know you have about 10 different bullet points or so on the engineering problems of the tabernacle. So can you just walk us through some of those? Okay. And these I guess for point of reference, are on my website, which is project314.org. And I just want to just start with the parallelogram, if you will. A parallelogram, structurally speaking, is awful, whereas a triangle is excellent. What I mean by that is take yourself a cardboard box,
take a long, like a refrigerator box, and try to set anything 10, 15 pounds on it, and it's going to collapse. That square cross section, if you got the long axis of the cardboard box, parallel to the ground, so the refrigerator box is laying down, and you're putting a weight on it with with an open end, and this is how the rectangular model is kind of comparable to. It's got a open end at the east side, well, with vertical poles, but they take on kind of that parallelogram thing. So a parallelogram, of course, is a four-sided shape that has the two opposing sides always parallel. So if you can imagine pins at the corners, that's kind of what's happening. It's collapsing, it's rotating. The sides, the lengths of those sides stay the same. But it pivots around that corner joint, and that corner joint it becomes very hard to reinforce. It's you get a lot of torque generated at that spot, force times the distance, and this is why it's just you always need to put in something triangular to reinforce, so you're not getting into that the collapsing of that geometry of that. Square turning into essentially a parallelogram. To me, when I started to really think about this and look at that was a pretty no-brainer to me. It's like, as a builder, you just wouldn't do that, and this is why you see on most of the models, they're taking the leather on top of the tabernacle that they're assuming that fourth layer of leather, and they are pulling it tight. And they're pulling it out, again, a little bit A-frame-like. And not all the models have this, but most of the models do. And they do that in part to give this thing lateral stability. Because if you don't have something anchored down, it's like, like a big radio tower. They'll put the cables out, in the middle section, and then they'll pull that away, a few hundred feet from the base and anchored into the ground. Why? Because you're making these triangles which cannot bow and change. So you can't change the angle of a triangle without trying to extend the length of the shape. And this is what the parallelogram, it allows the length of the sides to stay the same, and that's why it just wants to topple. I mean, that's the nature of that's the engineering behind that. It's no nothing they didn't understand back 4,000 years ago. This is pretty obvious type stuff.
Okay, so in that model, you got this. It's got three sides basically. It's got the two sides and the west side. The east side's open,
yep.
Other than some pillars in the front, but it's
yep.
It's not. Those pillars are not connected to the sides. So I mean, structurally speaking, when you first put that thing up, especially before you put the canopy over it, it's very unstable. I mean, if they've got any kind of major wind going on, I mean, what's the wind going to do to a nice, big, long, flat surface like that?
Well, exactly. It's a billboard effect. It's the amount of reinforcement you need on a billboard. It's notable because the wind loads, they really start stacking up. Another thing you have to remember: these beams are. Again, depending upon your cubit standard and depending upon how they interpret certain, let's see, can't think of which verse that is. I'll come in a second here. These big beams, and we're talking anywhere between 1,200 on the south end, and when I say south end, on the lowest end, and 6,000 depending upon the size of your cubit. And if you're assuming these beams are cubit and a half by 1 cubit by 10 cubits, which is the conventional interpretation, you're looking at a beam of a few thousand pounds or 2-3 tons. Now, I mean, if you can imagine trying to stand that upright and then anchoring it into a few hundred pounds of silver that's really not even in the ground. I mean, it's just not the way you go about building things. I mean, that's
so. One beam is how heavy?
If you're looking at 10 cubits by 1.5 by 1. That's coming in, I think, around 6,000 pounds. But if you're using a smaller cubit, like a 21-inch cubit or an 18-inch cubit, it's more common to use an 18-inch. It decreases drastically, probably down to about 2,000 pounds at that point. I don't have that.
Yeah, but that's 2,000 pounds at a minimum for one board. And how many boards were there?
Yeah, there's on the north side there's 20, and the south side there's 20 as well.
Okay, so first of all, they would have had to have found trees big enough to cut down and then shave into, and with flush edges, because they got to match up to each other, right?
Right. Well, that's the whole thing. You start looking at some of the amount of precision you're trying to make something that big with. Again, with crude tools and they weren't unsophisticated back then. I want to really stress that. But the amount of controlled surface that you're going to need. First of all, it's like putting studs in a wall. You see when people are doing framing out a house, they put a frame together, with gaps between between 2x4s, and they do that because you don't need to make a wall solid of 2x4s. No one in their right mind makes their house that way. I mean, even if people have all the money in the world, they spend it elsewhere because the wall only needs so much strength, and if you start wasting your materials, all you do is you run up your costs, and sometimes you end up running into more problems. In this case, if you're trying to make a wall out of solid timbers like that, again, shaving it down so they're all exact, and if you can imagine the amount of surface work that you need to do, shaving down the things so it's a perfectly level playing field or foundation point. So you're trying to stack these things all exactly next to each other. Either you're trying to keep the thing closed, or it's going to be whistling in the wind. And if it's whistling in the wind, again, why are you making big wood panels like that? It's just short of prudent. Is all I'd have to say on that.
Well, it's extremely heavy. I mean, if you've got, how many boards total, you said?
So you're looking at 20 boards on the north, 20 on the south, and then they've got some that they assume on the west. They assume 6 on the west, and then another, 4 by the Holy of Holies, and then they got on the far east side they got 5. So
about 55 boards of this size.
Yeah, ballpark. Yeah. So you figure, if we say a ton a piece, that's 100 tons right there.
Wow. And of course the assumption is, building the box, that they obviously the bottom of the board needs to be shaved flush so that it would fit into whatever base that it's going into, and then both sides of it at least would have to be flush. I mean, even if the front and back face of it isn't flush, it wouldn't impact much, I don't think, but the joining sides would have to be completely level, otherwise they would never join. You'd have just a big wind tunnel.
Yeah, conventionally they assume that, and this is they do this from the text, and so this is kind of I wouldn't say a best guess. This is like a religious person taking a text without having any building experience, or in some cases, common sense, or even mastery of basic units. I mean, there's pounds, there's inches, there's cubits, there's talents, as far as different units. So you got to convert those, which isn't that hard. There's some debate on different levels, but really, the thing here is you've got to address your units and your material quantities, because if it says you only get 2 talents of silver per board, so you got altogether that's maybe 150 pounds of silver. So you have to say, well, what's the density of silver? Silver is so many pounds per cubic inch. I want to say it's around 10 times out of water. I mean, talking in terms of specific gravity. And so 62.4 is water pounds. So if you multiply that by 10, you're looking at 600 pounds for that's rough numbers. Maybe it's 8 something for silver. I forget. So if you're doing that, you're going to have as far as one cubic foot is going to be weighing in at 600 some pounds. And so if you can imagine these these beams now, which they're assuming usually at a cubit and a half wide. Again, this is anywhere between, cubit and a half, 18, say 27 inches, 27 in my, no, I think I'm doing bad conversion on the fly there. So, no, that's okay. So that's more than 27 inches, and it's, for crying out loud, I can't.
But at any rate, I mean, you're talking, this is completely and totally impractical. Not to mention, I mean, to build something of that nature, I mean, what would you have to do for surface preparation?
Yeah, well, nothing if you don't want the building to look like it's straight. I shouldn't say that because they end up assuming that there's vertical poles that are running the whole length of the building that a lot of times they assume that they're kind of cored inside of these big beams. And so if you can imagine taking a big beam that's a foot thick and putting a big hole in it and then putting a long pole. So if you have a total of 20 of these things stacked side by side that are 1.5 cubits, that's 30 cubits. So if we're going to take our 30 cubits and say that's if you say 18 inches, that's it's 45 feet long. So if you can imagine stacking boards side to side to side to side, for a total length 20 boards at 45 feet, and making a hole that's completely lined up. So you got to maintain that hole that's lined through there. So this is again some of the other hardware that they don't get right, and they're not getting it right because the curtains basically they start out laying out the curtains wrong. So
well, yeah, but I mean, if these boards are supposed to be side by side flush to create a wall in the north and the south and the west, I mean, they're going to have to do quite a bit of surface preparation to have a reasonably straight and so the top's not all jaggy and I mean, it seems like a nightmare for having to set it up like that. I mean, you've got, I don't want to run out of time here because I want to just go ahead and get to the punchline, but if people want to check it out, they can go to project314.org, and there's a tab called Design, and in that one there's a link called Outside the Box, and we always talk about thinking outside the box. Well, you kind of end your thesis here by saying don't put God in a box.
Yeah.
So there's a whole bunch of other interesting bullet points, but the one that really kind of got to me, because with other research that I do, and people have heard me say this, I'm trying to take the Bible literally. I'm trying to be a Bible literalist. And especially when it comes to the Torah, because the Torah says do not add to it and do not subtract from it. I mean, it comes with a pretty hardcore command. Don't add to it, don't subtract from it. And when I was first introduced to your materials, I had all the yeah but questions, well, yeah but this, yeah but that. But you had made a statement, and I don't know if you made it here or if it was elsewhere, but basically in order to maintain this structure, in order for this structure to have any structural integrity, you've got to add a bunch of hardware not given in the itemized shopping list that Betzalel was given from Moses.
That's correct. And most of it amounts to like ropes and stakes, and this is where they, a lot of times they'll take that top layer of leather and they'll pull it out a little ways, at a 45-degree angle from the side of the building, and they'll anchor it down by means of stakes. Well, anyone who's been camping knows that those are awful trip hazards. Anyone who's, setting them up too, that's going to want to, cause the inside of the beams to want to pull inside. So instead of being up and down, they start wanting it to cave in at the tops. And then at the bottom, you got nothing to anchor. Again, what is 150 pounds of silver doing at the bottom? But keeping the beams off the dirt. I mean, it doesn't add any real base restraint. And so, why would you want to put silver on the ground? And again, the size. I was talking about the silver density. Is like saying, hey, this is important because it dictates how much material you can get at the base. What kind of moment of inertia in terms of physics, engineering and material strength, etc. How do you mount these bases on the ground? And some people say, well, these bases were buried. Again, what do you want to do burying silver? Well, use silver if you're going to bury it. And if you are going to bury it, what good does it do to bury the silver block? Because it really is not restraining anything, because you barely have any silver to bury. It's just
it's not the mass of it's not that much when you've got a ton on top of it, or however disproportionately heavy the wood is that's going into it. And you're right, if you're trying to stretch these heavy leather canvases over the top, I mean, they'd have to have all kinds of support structures on the inside to keep the walls from falling in on themselves.
Yeah, it's a little like taking a stake and pounding it about 4-foot stake, pounding it into the ground 2-3 inches, and thinking that you can't, push over the stake usually with 2 fingers. I mean, that's what we're talking about when we're talking about leverage and bottom restraint.
Okay, hold that thought. And we're back on the Revolutionary Radio Project. I am your host, Rob Skiba, and for this final half-hour segment, I'm speaking with my guest, Andrew Hoy. And so far, we've been addressing just a tip of the iceberg of some of the engineering problems associated with the traditional rectangular box model of the Tabernacle in the wilderness. And again, if you want to read more on it, you can get a lot more detail if you go to project314.org. And under the Design tab, just click on the Design tab, a drop-down menu outside the box. Now we're going to segue to the punchline. Okay, if it isn't a rectangle, then what is it? And one of the things that intrigued me, I was blessed to be able to see a few of Andrew's presentations, and in the beginning of one of them, he talked about some of the structures that were almost universally constructed in the ancient world. So, Andrew, take it away.
Sure. Well, you have like the yurt design, and yurt is, the etymology there again. Ger is the Hebrew word for sojourn, and some cultures actually make the sound of that building is more like a gert. It's more of a guttural G, which is very very similar to English Y, and so there's yurts have been used on several continents. Genghis Khan traveled, commanded the Mongol Empire from a yurt pulled on 22 oxen. This is a round building, and you've got Native Americans building around South Americans building around Aborigines and African huts and stuff. Round is a very practical shape. You have think of a fire inside of a house, a chimney, etc. If it's round, it's heated evenly, on the inside. Plus, you have a logical spot for a chimney with a higher ceiling.
Oh, like an igloo, even.
Igloos, teepees. An arch is about the strongest means of construction that's known. And so, I was studying the curtains, and I started looking at the math on the curtains, and I say, okay, 11 of these curtains, and they're 30 cubits long. That's just to fold one in half. Well, if you're connecting all the curtains long edge to long edge, again, that's going to be 11 times 4 is 44. This is 44 long. So if you connect them on the short edge, it's 11 times 30, which is 330. Well, now if you fold the one in half, rather than reducing it from 44 to 42, you're actually going to go reducing it from 330 long to 315 long. Now the thing is this makes a really long strip. Picture a piece of toilet paper rolled out, and let's see, you'd have about 15. You'd have the equivalent of 30 squares. So take your toilet paper out, roll it out on the ground, 30 squares long. That's the same proportion set that you're looking at for tabernacle curtains if you join them on the short edges. Well, there's another caveat here: is it doesn't give you any special latitude for. It says connect these curtains, one to another by means of loops that are on the side of the curtains. Okay, well, if you're doing that, it doesn't give you exclusion. Say, I'll put the ones on the end. And so when you come around, you say, well, that's describing a cylinder, and that's not the really fascinating thing. So I was looking at this, and I was saying, well, how does this lay out? I was just looking at the numerology tied into it, because I that's another hobby of mine is looking into some numerology from time to time, and I find out, well, 315. Well, that's really close to a multiple of a really important math constant. And so I'm reading a little farther than in the text, the next verse. After I said, okay, 11 times 30 is 330. Minus the 15 for the folded in half one, that's 315. And then it says in the next verse, and take a little from here, a little from there, about a cubit. And I, oh my, I said, this is pi. This is the relationship between a circle's circumference and diameter. It's 3.14159, 2. It goes on and on forever. But this is a rounded version. So 314. This is the this is the most accurate representative of pi in the ancient world. There's other cultures who had close, but this is pi to 2 digits. So we're looking at 1/20th of 1%. So when I saw that, I'm like, this thing it's got to be round. It has to be. And so I started looking at the rest of the hardware descriptions, and a lot of them are given without dimension, and a lot of them are given kind of contingent on other hardware pieces. So that the length of one piece is determined by the relative positioning of two pieces, etc. And so when I started looking at that, unfortunately there's a lot of other translation hurdles to overcome. I mean, if you're gonna play King Jimmy literalist, sorry, you might as well just go home. You can. You're just not going to get there from here, because they take all these words and they're translating it with the thinking that, hey, these curtains are joined flat edge to flat edge. This makes a big rectangular patch. We're making something big and long like a Winnebago or a tractor trailer of a truck, and this is what we're covering up. End of story. And so they start translating all these other words, and this took me a while to figure out, just because I wasn't that familiar with the translation. I'm looking at the Hebrew. It's like, well, I did go to Israel to learn Hebrew, but I didn't learn every single word, and I didn't learn every especially in the biblical record. There's still lots of vocabulary I got to go yet. And I started looking at this and getting into the meanings of these words and finding out how skewed the entire translation is, basically to give them some the representation that we know. So what we're looking at with this rectangle is all based on inference and assumptions. So they had one question when they were told to put these sheets together: which way do they go? Do they go long edge to long edge or short edge to short edge? And you do that wrong, and you're going to get the wrong shape. So
it starts with the presumption. Either way, you've got all these curtain strips, and it says connect the edges. So you've only got two ways to connect them: at the long end or at the short end. And if you connect them at the long end, you can't help but end up with a rectangle, but if you connect them at the short end, you end up with a circle. So take it from there. I mean, what about all the parts, and is it a better, more efficient way of utilizing the parts that you have if we're coming back from IKEA and opening the box? I mean, what are we looking at here if it's a circle?
Well, sure. I mean, first of all, the space, it tends to, as far as the economy of materials, nobody in their right mind builds a tent with thick, heavy walls. You're portable. You're desert people. You're nomadic. You're going from one spot to the next. You're carrying this thing for miles. if you're going to be making a tent, why are you going to make one that's that heavy? I mean, this is like worse than dragging a tractor trailer behind, because a tractor trailer, I'm sure, is just I haven't checked the weight on those things, but you're not pulling 100 tons on a tractor trailer, but you are with the amount of wood that you got here with the big thick beams. And so I'm saying, no, these things, if you're staggering them and you're putting this frame structure in a circular arrangement, and you're spacing them out the way that you would expect to put, every tent frame that I've been in, you got poles on the edges, and this is how you're spanning fabric. This is what you're doing when you're building a tent. You are spanning fabric, and you get a space that the area, the square footage on the ground alone is 17 times larger this way. You get a structure that's like three times taller as well. So this is really a remarkable building, is what it is.
It's like a big round circus tent.
And then some, yeah. It's more stable than a circus tent, but yeah, it's and if you can imagine, Israel's enemies, and they're talking about this big, huge, this tribe that's come out of Egypt, and licking up every resource on the land. If you can imagine, being a few miles out, and seeing this thing, you got a cloud of fire, by night, a cloud by day, and pillar of fire by night. If we're talking this thing, being lit up, this is something you could be seeing, for miles.
Oh, yeah. This would. We had a conversation about that too. Talk about the red leather. I mean, would it be somewhat translucent?
Well, sure. I mean, leather is. I mean, you get into take a chamois. When you're after you're done washing your car, you get these leather chamois, and you wipe off your chamois, or you wipe off the water, with the chamois. Hold that up to the sunlight. You can see how much light can pass through. So, in the Bezalel model, as I call it, the center is you've got an untreated center with more light. On the outside, you have, on the lower part of the structure, you're going to have the tanned leather. So it's a two-tone, and I think that light passage is deliberate, because this was set up on Aviv 1. This is the first day of the first month, and if they're on different calendars, this is very close to the equinox, basically, in modern calendar terms. And so they are told to put it up with it oriented in specific ways. North, south, east, west. Okay, here's the east gate, etc. The gate is located towards the east. Well, this is something that you can do on the equinox, because the equinox, you got the equal shadow thing going on. So a yurt, which has got a big ring in the center, is something that's what was I going to say? It's something. It becomes a timepiece. Is where I'm going with that.
Well, that's interesting too. And I would think that to set it up, I mean, all you need is a appropriate length rope for the radius, I guess, right?
Right.
You figure out where center is going to be, and the dude just stretches the rope out and walks in a circle, and they plant the securing stakes for the curtains, right? Right.
You have, or you're setting a marking location. I don't put silver on this model. I don't believe that that's what's being conveyed, because I think these beams are being described. It talks about how they're being set one to another, basically woman to sister, and one protruding from the next. And to me, this is another textual non-compliance. If you start looking at Hebrew, I think, as far as how these other ones are set, it's not in a protruding fashion at all. So if you have them protruding, your mechanics are such that. Again, you're spreading out the span of the whole thing more. You're just making better use of your materials.
So if the pillar of fire is going down through the middle of that thing, then I mean that would have been, well, first of all, probably pretty comforting to the Israelites who were camped out around it. I remember when I first heard your thesis, I had to drive back home. My wife's my father-in-law had died, and we were at a memorial service for him, and it was out in Fort Worth. I live in the Dallas area, so it was it was a pretty decent drive back home, but it was raining real hard, and I was basically stuck in a really long traffic jam on the highway, and I'm looking at all these red taillights out in front of me, and this random thought pops in my head. I wonder why they put red taillights on cars, just kind of a stupid random thought. But then I remembered when I was in the Army, and also in the Boy Scouts even, they always told us at night that we had to put a red filter on our flashlight, and when I went through flight school, I learned that the reason for that is that if you go from a well-lit area like indoors to outside, it takes you about 20 minutes to dark adapt for your eyes, the retina, to have enough rhodopsin in the rods accumulated so that you can see at night. And one of the colors that doesn't mess up the rhodopsin in your night vision is red. So I thought, wow, if that's the case, this light going through the middle of it, and it's semi-transparent, and it's all glowing, this red kind of nice, soothing, glowing light at night as a night light, but to their enemies, that would have been a terrifying sight to behold out in the desert.
Yeah, I mean, it really speaks to a combination of ancient tech and ability, and getting into the organization, to make something so massive. I mean, who in the world, who in history has made a tenth of that size? I mean, we're talking, if you're using a 25-inch cubit, you're talking, neighborhood of 6 stories tall.
6 stories tall? That is, we probably don't have time to get into the engineering aspects of how they build something like that. To raise up, well, first of all, what would be the supporting structures? Are you saying that what would be the walls of the rectangle are now becoming interlinking joints for like the supporting ribs of the dome? I mean, how does it work?
Right. It's it is very much like a ribbed dome, and you've got the whole thing is resting on something resembling pillars. Guess how many there are? Oh, say there's 10. How many commandments do you have? We have 10. Huh. It becomes a real, as far as a practical thing. I mean, I'm not looking at redundant, roofs. You're talking about the red site. In this, you've got that, probably, reddened for a reason, right? If we've got this, I'm saying that this is a visible layer of the leather. And, if it is lit up, it's something, again, that this speaks to purpose. And, I'm of the view that every single detail in there is perfect. This image actually has more symbolism than the rectangular one by factors of 10.
Oh gosh, yeah, sure does.
So they, the name of the project. I've got 2 projects here. One is project314.org, and the other one, Project Betzalel. Project Betzalel. I'm looking to build models here, and also I'm looking to do media arts type stuff. So, I was going to say with the. I just lost my train of thought here. What were you just talking on?
Well, just how amazing the thing would have looked out there. I mean.
Oh, okay. So Betzalel, the word Betzalel, this is the guy who Moses, had tasked to build the house. Now, in Hebrew, you've got every letter having a character, and you can break up words. They come from smaller words like Hezekiah. Chazak is getting into strength. Strength of Yah. Yah is the name for God. So you got all these different names. David is the beloved. That's what his name means. All Hebrew names have meaning, and Betzalel is no exception. So you have Betzalel. The bet, which is like where we get our English letter B from, is basically in Hebraic language is a house. The word Sal is shadow or image, and El is God. And so you've got literally the guy who's building the house. His name happens to be house in God's image. This is what he's building. So this image, as conveyed by the round model, is there's just loads more imagery and revelation that's being offered with it, and that's why I think this is, such an important discovery.
So we end up with a circle with a dome over it.
Mm-hmm.
What intrigues me about that is that we learn that Moses was given a blueprint of something in heaven that was supposed to be emulated on earth. So, I mean, we don't have time to unpack that, but just thinking about that alone has tremendous implications. I mean, we've probably got about a little less than 10 minutes left. Some people may say, so what? Who cares? What is the significance of any of this? Why do we need to know this?
Well, I guess I'd just maybe reiterate. I was giving a presentation this weekend here, and this is a topic that came up, and a question that came up, and one of the people who is a big fan of what I presented was really frustrated with the question, the fact that it was even asked, and kind of the spirit with which it was asked, and she started praying about it. Her name's Ruthie, and Ruthie's she got into her as far as the answer on that was don't you want to get to know me? So again, if this is Betzalel, this is house and image of God. Is it unimportant somehow that we know his image? I mean, he takes these people out of bondage. He says, I want them to hold a festival to me. And okay, now that you're here at Sinai, I want you to build it. I want you to build my house. Okay, so this is about me, like me, for me, etc. I want you to build this. This is important. And again, they think it's important enough to build the rectangle, and how much more is it to build? I think this round one, because this round one is really again it is an image, and it's just the resemblance to other things in nature, body, the physiology, the human anatomy connections are just, I think, remarkable.
It looks like an eyeball.
Yeah. And it talks about how Israel's the apple of God's eye, right? I mean,
yeah.
So you got this big, eyeball shaped thing sitting in their camp. I mean, that's it's really. Let's see. I'm trying to think of some small tidbits that I can throw out.
Well, you got about 5 minutes. So
okay. So Betzalel. So another word for another meaning of Betzalel. We have the idea it's God's onion, because in Hebrew Betzal is onion. Well, how does an onion work? You ever peel an onion? I mean, What does an onion have? It has layer after layer after layer. And guess what? If you ever see an onion growing in the field, in your garden or what have you, a lot of the onion varieties, of course, are what? They're cropping out near the soil. I mean, the way that this dome structure, has an appearance of cropping out. So here's a guy named Betzalel, house and image of God, and incidentally, getting into the name of God, one of the names of God is El Shaddai, and the way that I figured this connection out, I said, well, okay, 3:14. What does 3:14 mean in Hebrew? Well, ancient Hebrew didn't have the Roman, not only Roman numerals, but it didn't have Arabic. I think that the number system we have now is Arabic in origin, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, the Hebrew letters were numbers.
Right. And so you've got the same way you'd say, okay, if A is 1, B is 2, C is 3, every single word that they spoke would have a numerical value.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, well, what is the value of 314 in Hebrew? Well, Shin is 300. Yud is 10, and Dalet is 4. So these are the words with which you use to spell Shaddai. Okay, so we got El Shaddai is the name for God. It's like God Almighty, and so I would even go so far as to argue it's implying God eternal, because of what Shaddai, the 314, what does that imply? It implies he's the God without beginning or end. Okay, so if El Shaddai says, make a house in my image, it stands to reason it would resemble at least one of his names, right?
Wow, that's pretty cool. We've got about a minute left. Where can people find out more about your materials and contact you?
Well, right now, project314.org. Again, I'm going to be another website, and the 314.org. I am hoping to do a crowdfunding soon, so I can be producing more videos here to get into the education, so people aren't relying on a drawing set, because not a lot of people either have the technical moxie, interest, or inclination to look through someone's drawings like that. So I want to make more videos, etc., and then I want to start getting into model building as well. So I'm looking for collections of volunteers on this, and that's also on my webpage. So
and can they contact you? Can they contact you through project314.org?
That's correct.
Oh, very good. Wow, man, I knew we were going to run out of time. There's just so much to talk about, but this is certainly a good teaser. And as I say, always leave them wanting more, so hopefully they'll go check your site out. I hope you do get the funding. I'd love to see one of these things actually constructed out there somewhere. I think that'd be pretty amazing. But, wow, man, that's all the time we have for tonight. Andrew, thank you so much for coming on with us tonight.
Thank you, Rob. Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem.
Amen. And thank you guys so much for listening to the Revolutionary Radio Project. That's all the time we have for tonight, so we'll see you back same time next week. Good night, everybody. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video presentation. If you did, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, like the video, and share it on your favorite social media sites. There's a lot more to come, so stay tuned, and we'll see you back next time.